Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are on book 3 of the Glamourist Histories series. So in this book, I think the most standout thing to me, other than the, extremely explicitly drawn class issues, political side, bar note, whatever stuff, the most explicitly drawn thing to me in this is the one where Jane she basically is given serious flaws to overcome in this. In the other books, it's not that she is, a flawlessly perfect human being, but in the first one, you kind of have her put into an extremely difficult situation that it's hard to see your way out of, and so, mistakes are all wholly forgivable. In the second book, she makes some errors of judgment, but again, several of those errors are due to her not knowing what's going on and not understanding what's happening, and thus not being able to make decisions with the full force of information. That is, her husband is working as a secret agent, but she doesn't know that he's working as a secret agent, so when he acts secretive and tells her he doesn't want her to go with him places, she doesn't know that he's working as a secret agent, so she can only work under the assumption that something has gone wrong in their relationship, because previous to this, they have been full partners in, doing this work as being artists, and the fact that he suddenly doesn't want her there is really, really, painful to her, and she doesn't know what it is that's going on with him, and so she can't, make proper judgment calls on it. The lapses that she makes are sort of forgivable, but here what we get is Jane falls victim to the class prejudices of the English, because some of us may recall the film Blazing Saddles by Mel Brooks, and you may recall near the end of the film when they bring over the black people and the various railway workers to help them build their replica of the town, that it's eventually agreed that they'll give land to the black people and the Chinese. I will not directly quote this film. I have no intention of getting censored by YouTube just because I was quoting somebody accurately. But they'll give land to the blacks and the Chinese, but we don't want the Irish. And it is something that is perhaps forgotten somewhat at this end of history among those who are, not A, from the British Isles, and B, not English from the British Isles, because I'm sure that the Welsh and the Scottish, and obviously also the Irish, still remember this, but for the rest of us, it looms a little bit less large. But yes, there was a time when the Irish were heavily, sincerely, massively, super marginalized, and so there are a lot of very negative stereotypes of them, and for example, Jane's perspective on them changes, that she says, well, they don't seem Irish, they don't have Irish accents, and when her husband says, well, yeah, but they have a crucifix on the wall, and, the family surname is O'Brien, and when people are saying things like, oh, well, they're Irish, you should make sure to get paid in advance, and she starts to absorb this. When people start saying things like, well, they're Catholic, and Catholics have, they can't marry outside their religion, and that sort of thing, she very much falls victim to this thinking, that she automatically assumes that when she hears the young man of the family who is trying to court her younger sister Melody, hears him speaking with somebody and getting fiery about whatever issue that's going to cause them to march on Parliament, she assumes that it must be a violent march and not, and not that it could be a peaceful march. She doesn't ask them questions, she just assumes the worst. And she keeps on assuming the worst. And so you have that, and then you have, and it comes to a head when she thinks that her sister has eloped with young Mr. O'Brien, but it turns out that what happened was that he has arranged an appointment with Melody, Jane's younger sister, to see an oculist. That is, she's going to the optometrist to get glasses. And Jane is taken aback to discover that her sister has vision problems. She is farsighted. That is, she has no trouble seeing things far away, but has a great deal of trouble seeing things that are close to her. And her sister tearfully chews her up one side and down the other, rather rightfully, for all of the times that she said that, she had told her sister, my eyes hurt and I can't see this properly, and Jane's only response had been, you're not applying yourself enough. Now, there is fault to be given to Melody, who had frequently, been very, very flighty, but the fact is that Jane had simply assumed that her sister was taking on their mother's tendency to be a hypochondriac, or was even making excuses to avoid doing the work, not that her sister couldn't see the notes on the page, that her sister couldn't see the words on the page, that her sister couldn't see these things clearly. And so she's hit with that, and then she's hit with the fact that she was believing that O'Brien couldn't marry her sister because of his religion, because she had been listening to rumors that had been put about by the Anglican Church to marginalize the Irish and to say, well, the Irish can't marry outside of their religion, that's why you shouldn't be getting into relationships with them, and so on and so forth. And she is basically given a very, very sharp slap in the face on this matter. And metaphorical, of course, but nonetheless, it staggers her. And it's a very, very interesting departure from the books, because, of course, previous to this, Jane had been the one who was more in the right more often than not, and now she has found herself wholly in the wrong on numerous issues. And her having been in the wrong on all those numerous issues then causes some unfortunate fallout, because if she had been more willing to trust that just because they were Irish didn't mean they were bad, if she had been more willing to, listen to her sister, listen to other people, if she had been less prejudiced, she could have cut off some tragedy that befalls them, because what happens is, the reason the title of this book is called Without a Summer is because basically the weather has taken a turn to be extremely cold, and it's May and yet it's still snowing. Well, there's an unexpected experience. And people have decided that so-called coldmongers are behind it. Now, the thing about glamour is that mostly it's about illusion, but one can manipulate the physical reality of the world enough to make things cold. However, it puts a tremendous strain on the person making things cold, because glamour, it appears, generates heat, and so you're not merely fighting with, making things cold, you're fighting with the fact that using it is making things hotter, and this is one of those things that people make the lower classes do that make the lower classes have a much higher mortality rate than everybody else, but we just cheerfully pretend that the only reason they're in the lower class is because they are morally bankrupt or lazy or something. And the thing is that the coldmongers are being accused of causing the cold weather, which they physically can't do. It is just impossible for them to do it, but because people don't care about science, because people don't listen to facts, they have just decided that unilaterally that this is what the coldmongers are doing because they are holding people hostage with cold weather or something. And the coldmongers who are being very severely mistreated, who are losing business, and this is their livelihood, to, cool buildings when it's hot, to cool drinks, to, make things cooler, they have decided that they are going to have a protest march. And in the course of this protest march, a conspiracy is put in place in order to get somebody into power, and part of this is because he doesn't care about other people. He has arranged, in effect, to artificially create a riot by, when these people are marching, he's going to have a bunch of English soldiers step out and aim guns at them, thus causing panic and firing upon people, and then causing a riot and chaos in the streets, and then sweeping in and claiming, oh look, I stopped the riot from happening. And Jane and Vincent, when they realize that this is a trick, that this is a trap, that the person who was behind the suggestion of the march is in fact an agent of this conspiracy, they try to stop it, and they get scooped up in everything, and everybody gets accused of grand high treason, and there's some courtroom drama and a last-minute turn that gets everybody out of it. But none of this would have happened if Jane had been willing to talk to these people about her suspicions, about what she'd overheard, about what she'd seen, about her confusion, about all of these things. And it is her prejudice that nearly causes the death of a good man, that nearly gets her and her husband sentenced to death. And it's a sharp twist. Now, Mary Robinette Kowal says that she stole part of the plotline of Emma, and maybe she did, but I feel like some of the high drama in this may have been somewhat less than was in Emma. That is, we continue to be in that place and time, but the language continues to feel less Jane Austen than the first book, and large aspects of this plot feel less Jane Austen, despite the selections of Emma taken from it. It's rather like Clueless, the movie Clueless, which is ostensibly Emma, except it's really, really not. I mean, it is in that you can follow the plot beats, but it isn't in that I suspect everything that happens in that movie Austen would probably have found horrifically appalling. And so, this is once again, and I do hesitate to call this a Regency romance, if only because the romance between the sister and O'Brien is background. It is not front and center, because this is Jane's story, not Melody's, and the romance between her and her husband is also, they're a married couple who love each other very dearly, and so on, but the romance is not fundamental and central in the way that it might be elsewhere. I don't know. It's a delightful read. It's fun. It does take a turn just to humanize Jane a little bit more, lest we become tired of her unending perfection. Which, she isn't perfect, but one could see a theoretical sense of it. So, highly recommend, very enjoyable, and I don't really have anything else to say on this, so I guess I will see you all next week.